All right, I see that it's 6:30 and we are still collecting people as they sign in. Welcome to the first of our 3 long-range facility plan focus group meetings. Just a bit of logistical protocol housekeeping here. We are recording this meeting. The recording will be posted on our webpage within probably this week, and that will be part of our record as we proceed. So please keep your video on so we can see you. Staff can turn off their video if you wish. We also ask that you keep the camera or your microphone muted while we're doing the presentation. We do have time for questions, so we will be asking you to engage us as we go along. But during the presentation, please keep yourself muted. This meeting is public record, so everything that's going on is going to be part of the record. So as you use the chat button or feature, even if you're doing it privately to an individual, that is public record. So please keep that in mind. We also, have a lot to cover here tonight, and we do have questions period after each segment of the meeting. So I'd ask you to hold your questions until we get to that point. I would also ask that as we're going along and you have questions come to mind, please type them in the chat, because we can then use that as our guide during that timeline. Also, if you have questions, you can use the raise your hand button. You can also raise your hand in the screen. That way we can see you and proceed with your questions. So, you have your names all on there. That's great. We will do a moment where we're able to introduce all of ourselves to one another. So with that, in terms of our kind of our protocols here with this meeting, I'd like to start off by introducing our superintendent, Don Grotting, who has a few comments before we start the meeting. So Don, please.
Thank you, Steve, and a special shout out and thank you to all of our long-range facility plan committee members. Just thank you for serving your community, especially in these unprecedented times and difficult times, and taking time away from your families, as I know that's very difficult. So just a huge shout out to you. And as you know, we are operating in unique times from both an operational and instructional perspective. And while most of our eyes right now are on the instructional process, making sure our students are getting what they need instructionally, we still have the operational side of the district that is very important, that needs to go forward to ensure the long-term success of the district. And as most of you know, I'm sure, I know a couple of you know, we've been involved in reforming middle school boundaries, and that project, and I see that Abhijit and Michelle from that committee are here volunteering. So thank you for your resilience and grit. I don't want to maybe question your sanctity around coming on for round 2. So, but really appreciate you signing up for this project. And as you know, we're continuing with the work being done by the 2014 bond, $680 million capital bond projects. And I also believe that Brian Kennedy from the Bond Accountability Committee is participating in this group. And I'm sure, Brian, that you'll be called on to share your expertise as we go forward with this. This project and committee is going to be very important to the future of the school district as we move forward. and prior to looking at going out for future capital bonds. And you will really be helping us from a community perspective, identify from your perspective, the capital investments, the priorities that need to be made in our district. And what I want to tell you is that when the committee was formed, both Carl, Josh Gomez, and Steve came to me along with Robert McCracken and talked about, wow, wait till you see this committee. We have got expertise, we've got varying perspectives, and this is going to be a great committee. I know you have a short time to do some work, but they said if anybody can do it, this committee is really up for it. And I just want to thank you once again and look forward to hearing some of your recommendations, but also some of your questions, concerns that will come out of this committee, and things that I need to consider as a superintendent, but also that our school board needs to consider. So with that, I know you have a lot of work to do, but I truly, truly want to thank you for being a service, not only to the school district, to the students of the Beaverton School District, to staff, but to the entire community. So thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Don. What I neglected to do earlier is introduce myself. My name is Stephen Sparks. I'm administrator for long-range planning with the district. And we will get to introductions here in a minute of everybody else. So forgive me for my rudeness in not introducing myself. I'm going to turn it over next to our team that we have hired to help us draft the plan and synthesize all the data that we have generated over the past couple of years, and to work with you in crafting our plan. So to start, I'm going to turn it over now to Leroy Landers, who you see at least next to me, at least on my screen, is next to me on my right. So Leroy, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Steve. My name is Leroy Landers. I'm a principal at Malum Architects. And as Steve mentioned, we have been working with district leadership group for, well, since probably about midsummer or so, getting ready for this meeting this evening. We have a tremendous amount of information that we're going to be delivering to you this evening. And the intent is to really have all of this information serve as background and in preparation for our next meeting with you on December 15th, which is where we'll be sharing with you plan approaches that would have been developed by the district. And so this information is going to really help you assess those plans and really understand need across the district. So we're going to start really quickly with some introductions and talk very briefly about the process we're going to be going through and have been going through. That'll be followed by just a quick discussion about key guiding principles and goals that have been established by the district. And then we're going to touch on three key areas of need: educational program, facility condition, and capacity enrollment. And as Steve mentioned, at the end of each one of these sections, we'll have an opportunity for about 10 minutes for a discussion or questions that you might have relative to that section. So our goals for this evening: just get to know each other quickly and understand where everyone's coming from. We want you to be able to understand the long-range facility planning process so you can understand how this work fits into the bigger picture as we move along. We also want you to understand the district vision as it relates to education and its impact on facilities, and to really understand some core guiding principles, and then really develop this high-level understanding of need across the district. So let's talk a little bit about why we're here in front of you. Actually, you're probably wondering who is this person and why were they hired. We are Malum Architects. We have offices in Portland and Seattle, about 100 staff, and really designing and planning for learning environments has been a core part of the firm's practice for more than 80 years. That includes both higher education. We've been working with the Beaverton School District on and off for more than 25 years now on various projects. And from a long-range long-range planning process, we've done more than 35 long-range plans for districts primarily throughout the Pacific Northwest. We are joined with Angela Planning Group, and Angelo has been a longtime partner with us and also a very long-time partner with the district. They've worked for more than 21 years with the district. Angelo Planning Group has also been engaged in long-range plans, 2 of which have been for Beaverton School District, and they do a lot of land use planning as well for districts throughout the region. So here I am, and with me are Frank Angelo of Angelo Planning Group, partner there, and Jennifer Lubin, who is a senior planner for Malem. And you'll see their photographs pop in and out of your screen periodically, probably. The core leadership team has really consisted of the folks you see here on your screen, and Stephen and Josh, Aaron, and Robert are all with us here this evening, and they're really here to do 2 things. One is to listen to your questions and comments, not only in this meeting, but in the meetings going forward, but also to serve as a reference for us, really. If you have any detailed questions that we can't answer, then we can ask them as a resource. And of course, your group. And what we thought we'd do is just take, maybe if we could ask each of you to take 20 or 30 seconds, just introduce yourself to everybody. You'll pop up on the screen, and just say maybe just a brief sentence regarding your relationship to Beaverton, the school district, and why you're here. So,
and I would ask everybody to, on the screen, just proceed down the list, starting with Kevin, who's not here. So we'll start with Michelle, and then as we work our way down, we'll then start with Angel, and Rob, when we get to Brian, that's all you, bud. So Michelle.
Hi, I can't see my video preview, so I'm not sure if you can see me.
I can see you.
Okay. Yeah, I have a sophomore and a 7th grader this year at the International School of Beaverton, but I'm also really invested in the district because I have an almost 2-year-old who hasn't even begun yet. So I'm here because I want to help everyone in the district. I've been a Beaverton School District parent for a long time, and I will be for a long time. So hoping I can help.
Thank you and welcome. Jason here?
Yeah. My name is Jason Ohnbaum. I'm a parent of 5th, 3rd, and 1st grader at McKay Elementary, and I am a former district technology coach. Spent 3 years working with the district.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Brian Kennedy. I have a 6th grader at Meadow Park and a freshman and a junior at Sunset High School. I've also been on the Bond Accountability Committee since 2014. I'm currently the chair. I'm also the Chief Financial Officer for Metro, the regional government. So I have a lot of background in long-term financial planning, capital planning. Also spent some time doing facility planning for the Parks and Nature Department at Metro as well.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Welcome.
My name's Rob Zeller. I'm an associate planner at the City of Beaverton. I'm standing in for Brian Martin, who is the long-range planning manager. I've been with the city for about 3 years, and I've been working on our housing project. Before that, I was in the architecture field for about 10 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Welcome.
Alfredo is not here this evening, so Angel.
Hi there, my name is Angel Nunez. I actually don't know where any of the little subtitles for me came from. I'm not any of those things, but I thought it'd be a funny talking point. But I am pretty fresh out of college and passionate about education generally. That's the reason that I want to be on this group. In terms of my career background, I work in financial advising, so I do have some experience with investments and thinking about long-term financial planning from that perspective, and hope I can provide useful perspective when it comes to this as well.
Great, thank you. Oh, and we looked into a crystal ball, and that's your future, actually.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I've heard really good things about Sunset.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. It wasn't a crystal ball. I looked at a map. I looked at where your residence is, and those are your attendance areas.
Oh, perfect.
Hi, my name is Abhijit. I was one of the two, along with Michelle, in the middle school planning committee, and I have kids in Findlay. Like Michelle said, I also have been part of the district for a long time and will be part of the district for a long time. I do believe that if you want to get involved, you need to contribute. And I do contribute with my PTO, with libraries and everything. I think Leroy sort of answered all my aims. I'm here to understand how does this process work, first of all, and how does public get its inputs in. And I'm very passionate about doing the right thing for the districts, and hopefully I'll be able to contribute.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you and welcome.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Schmidt, and my two children, who are both grown, and one of them is a parent in himself, are both products of the Beaverton Public School District. And thanks to Carl Mead, my son actually got out of Mountain View Middle School without too many scrapes. So I'm very appreciative to him for that. I'm now a senior citizen. I retired from the Association of Oregon Counties 4 or 5 years ago, and I've been actively involved with Beaverton City policy and with Washington County policy. And I thought that this presented an opportunity to really get close to the public school system that I love so much and really want to support. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Raghav Shan. It's pronounced Raghav, like government, Raghav. I have a 4th grader at Springville and a future BSD student who's currently 11 months today. So I have a long-term vested interest, like Michelle and Abhijit, in seeing BSD succeed. Professionally, I am a legal counsel for Oregon Health and Science University. So I do have some experience with contracting and the RFP process, which I think is in the same vein of what we're going to be working on here. So I'm excited to be part of the group.
Great, thank you.
And we won't hold the fact that you're a Purdue graduate against you.
Boil her up.
Happy birthday to your little one too.
Hi, I'm Kimmy Sloop, and I have a junior at Beaverton High School and a recent graduate at Beaverton High School, and they both went to West TV Elementary and then Rachel Carson Environmental Middle School. So I've been in the district for a long time as well, and in a former life, I was a land use planner, and so I think this type of stuff is really fun. And so that's why I wanted to be involved in doing it and get more involved in the schools, with the school district in a different way than just at the schools.
Great, thank you. And I love that attitude. I love someone excited about planning, so thank you. All right, so Frank, do you want to take over for a minute and talk a little bit about this?
Sure.
What we're doing?
Sure. Thank you, Leroy. I'm Frank Angelo Planning Group. And as in addition to my work with the school district over the last 20 plus years, my two kids went through the Beaverton School District system as well, to Ridgewood, Cedar Park, and Sunset High School. And like Eric, I owe Carl a debt to get my son out of Sunset High School as well. So there's two of us here tonight that are indebted to Carl Mead. Anyways, what I'd like to do is quickly, about 4 slides, to just give you a context for what a long-range facility plan is. I made a note when Don was talking. I thought he summarized it pretty well. Actually, a long-range facility plan really is designed to guarantee the long-term success of the district. So that's part of our task today and in the upcoming months, to develop the plan to look to maintain and continue the long-range success of the Beaverton School District. But really, what is a long-range plan itself? There are really kind of 2 big components. One is a summary of facility needs over, say, a 10-year period, as well as developing a strategic management tool that the district can use to assess facilities over the long term and make decisions on facility improvements. Ultimately, one of the products of a long-range facility plan is to create a prioritized capital plan that can go out to the community and can achieve community support. Next slide, please. What a long-range facility plan can do is it can provide a district the information it needs to make good decisions for facilities, as well as programming decisions, educational programming decisions. It allows the district to coordinate with the local jurisdictions in which it's located in regarding development within a district. Beaverton School District has two primary jurisdictions, Washington County and the city of Beaverton, that the bulk of the area in the district boundaries are included in. Both districts will ultimately adopt or at least accept the long-range facility plans as a part of their public facilities element of their comprehensive plans. So that ensures coordination into the future with the jurisdictions. The long-range facility plan also helps the district strategically plan for future facility needs and keeping the community informed and building support for any future potential bond programs. An element of the facility plan will be to establish an ongoing cycle for maintaining capital investments and keeping them up to date. And the long-range facility plan is grounded in some statewide statutes, ORS, Oregon Revised Statute 195-110, which was adopted in the mid-1990s, established the requirement that school districts prepare long-range facility plans and has prescribed what elements go into that long-range facility plan. OAR 581-027 came later, and it came through I believe, the Department of Education. And in order for the school district to be eligible for certain state funding packages, the district has to have a long-range facility plan in place. Next slide, please. Why now? And that's a very good question. When we gathered together as our group, we asked ourselves that question, given the pandemic, given the state of the world, why is now a time to update the facility plan? One reason is ORS 195-110 requires a 10-year plan, and the last long-range facility plan was adopted by the school district 10 years ago. So there's a timing element to this. In order to be eligible for future state funds, state educational capital funds through OAR 581-027, the district needs to have an updated long-range facility plan. A new element that will be brought into this plan that was not really highlighted in earlier plans was to add an equity lens to the school facility planning process. As the district becomes more diverse, this is really an important element of future planning for school facilities. The plan, why now, is the plan will also provide an opportunity to plan ahead for new capital programs. As Don noted, the most recent bond, the 2014 bond, is coming to an end. Most of the projects are done or in the process of wrapping up. So there are new opportunities ahead for the school district as that bond is completed. And district facilities continue to age, pandemic or not. There are many of the school facilities as you'll hear later on in the presentation, are old and are in need of repair. So this is one process to take advantage of and use to identify those needs and make recommendations for improvements. And it also will provide an opportunity to identify efficiencies in district facilities. Next slide, please. Historical context for the long-range facility plan. This is actually the third long-range facility plan. The first one was prepared in 2002, and the second one in 2010. And both plans identified capital needs and the need for new schools. Those plans were prepared really in the environment when the enrollment of Beaverton School District was growing very rapidly. I mean, it was not uncommon to have enrollment increases of 500 to 1,000 students per year on an annual basis. So it was a very rapid period of rapid growth, and the planning was really done to account for that. And it did identify capital needs and the need for new schools. And both of those long-range facility plans led to successful school construction bond programs, one in 2006 for 195 million and one in 2014 for 680 million. As I noted, planning was done during a period of high student enrollment growth. Looking forward, Washington County and Beaverton will continue to grow. They're forecasted to grow, but at a slower pace than historically many of us are used to seeing in Washington County and Beaverton. And this has had an effect on the future enrollment forecast for the school district. Beaverton School District contracts with Portland State University Center for Population Research, and they come up with 10-year forecasts for many school districts throughout the state, but for as well as the Beaverton School District. And as you'll hear later, the enrollment forecasts over the next decade have flattened considerably. And in fact, there are the forecasts are for some decline in enrollment. So that provides a little different context than for this long-range facility plan than previous long-range facility plans. And with that, I will turn it back to Leroy, who will talk about what a long-range facility plan considers.
Okay, and I'll give this is a very high level overview, very, very quick, but I think it'll give a nice picture of what we're really going to be looking at and a lot of what you're going to be seeing tonight. There are many different things that are considered in a long range facility plan, and we found it useful to really try and group these or collect these into 3 key areas of consideration, or sometimes we call them buckets, if you will. The first one of these is educational program, and that includes a whole bunch of information. Here's just a short list of some of the things that fall in that bucket, things like educational specifications, specific program needs, kindergarten, STEM programs, technology, those sorts of things. The second area of consideration involves enrollment and capacity. So this is really sort of a supply and demand type of bucket. It's really how many kids are in the district, how many are projected to come, and do you have enough seats and enough space to really accommodate those students. And then the third bucket is facility condition, and that really looks at literally the physical condition of the buildings. Someone goes out and does an assessment of each one of the buildings to understand what its systems are like and where repair might need to happen. It also includes an aspect associated with educational or academic suitability as well, and we'll talk about that. But each of these 3 buckets are really just full of facts, essentially. And what you do with the facts is really driven by the dashed line around the outside. They're really guided by the goals, the vision, and guiding principles that are established for education in the district. And then you can assess how the buildings stand up and support that, or they don't. And out of these considerations, the goal is to really develop a long-range facility plan that looks at prioritized need and what the best steps to take are in the district in a phased way. And that sort of leads into this next slide. Really, a long-range facility plan is trying to avoid the 2 outside boxes. It's trying to avoid a Band-Aid approach where you don't have a plan in your facilities, and it's trying to recognize that no district out there can afford to fix everything. And so where we're really targeting is a strategic phased plan, looking at what your immediate needs are in the first 10 years or so. That would be box number 1. What are your likely needs following that? And then so on down the line. And what we're really looking at here is striking a balance between capital, which is really the resources that your community determines they're able to provide in terms of a level of support, balanced against different types of priority need in the district. And there are 3, kind of generally speaking, 3 groups of people that are commonly involved with development of a long-range facility plan, 2 of which of the groups are here this evening. The district leadership committee, sometimes called a district steering committee, and then also the focus group, which is the rest of you sitting right here in the middle. And then later on, you'll see where you have plans to go out to a broader community outreach as well. So what does this focus group really do? What are we asking you to do tonight? We would like you to attend meetings consistently. There are only 3 meetings, and which is good. And we'd love to have you come to all of them because they build on each other. We want you to keep in mind the big picture. We hope you are able to express your point of view at the end of all this after you've absorbed the information, and really provide some key input regarding proposals that the district develops for the long range plan. And they will consider very seriously the input that you give them. And as you do that, you're going to be providing also insight into public support, the level of capital funding that seems reasonable or not, how much support might be expected. I'm going to jump down to the bottom here in view of time. It is really not your responsibility. We're not asking you to really lead the planning process, and we're not putting pressure on you to make any final decisions regarding capital expenditure. That's really the realm of the district after they've taken your recommendations and thoughts in mind, and we won't be establishing policy. That's really for the board to be doing. From a scheduling standpoint, you can see here we have been working since kind of midsummer gathering information, and actually even before that as well. And it's really been building up to a first meeting with you here where we will present this collection of highly summarized need. We then meet with you on December 15th, where you will get to see some plan proposals or a plan proposal from the district and be able to sort of evaluate it in view of the need that you see tonight. We will incorporate your input where it is appropriate, take that information to some outreach meetings, gain additional input from broader groups of folks, and then come back to you and report back with regard to where the plan seems to be moving and if it checking in to see if it makes sense. So here are these meetings. December 15th is the next, and then March 8th would be the final. And with regard to that high-level overview of the process, if there are any questions, we probably could take a few minutes really quick and address any. And if not, we can move on to the next phase.
Now, I'm not seeing anything in chat, and I don't see anybody waving their arms. So, and I don't see any hand raising. So going once, twice, thrice, we are going to move to the next section.
Great, and thank you for that. If you can always ask a question if one comes up later at the end of the next session. We were a little behind, but that really helped a lot. All right, so our next topic is vision and goals, and I believe Steve, you volunteered to walk us through this.
Yeah, I don't want to give this short shrift, and it is quite important, but we also have a lot of material here tonight. So you've seen our WE logo and what we aspire to do in everything that we do as a district. And so, about, the excellence, the innovation, the equity and being collaborative, those are key components of those pillars under the WE strategy for moving forward as a district. Next slide, please. In terms of our guiding principles, our steering committee, the leadership component, we're looking at what do we want to have guide our planning process and in developing this plan. What is the most important? And as you can see here, we do have lots of aspirations, these principles that we want to achieve. And a lot of it is financial because we want to be responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. And we want to be smart in the areas of investment where we do that. Again, being responsible with the taxpayers' dollars. So next slide, please. And you can see again, it's a lot of the same kind of guiding principles of, being able to support our educational programs in terms of having those flexible systems, but also, in terms of evolving with those needs. So when we did the plan in 2010, early education was an issue or a subject that people were aware of, but it has become an essential part of what we do now. And we didn't have plans in the 2010 plan to program for pre-K education. So that's kind of thing that we want to be sure that we're ahead of, that we recognize what's changing in the educational fields and be able to respond appropriately and effectively by identifying in our facilities plan the types of needs that the schools might need to accommodate education. So the guiding principles also is very important on equity. As we as a community and as a country have seen over the past months, if not years, is that the need for social and community equity is paramount. And we want to be sure that we are incorporating what the district has stated as its values for equity across the district. So this isn't to, the plan isn't to focus on one area or, one, school level or anything like that. We got to look across the district, not only in terms of need, but is it providing an equitable basis, in terms of those priorities and investment of funds. Next slide, please. So in terms of the collaboration, obviously we have a lot to be collaborative with, which is part of the reason why you're here. You represent lots of different communities. Eric, I'm going to pick on you because you said yourself as a senior, I wouldn't call you that, but if you want to, we have a senior community that needs to know why this is important. We have plenty of you who have students at varying levels of, the education. And so talking with your neighbors and other communities that why this is important, and to hear back from people. So we need to hear from you in terms of kind of a report out, what is on people's mind. The city of Beaverton is here because we do have a coordination and collaboration need with the local agencies. So there's a lot of collaboration that does need to occur. I think that's the last slide. No, the equity lens. This is again getting to that very important part of equity with the district. When we undertake decisions, we ask ourselves through the equity lens, we ask ourselves these 4 questions. And it is a part of the process. It's not necessarily to say this trumps all others. I'll look to Abhijit and Michelle on this issue. When we were talking about the middle school boundaries, there's lots of different factors that go on, and each one may have a different field than the next one. But equity is always going to be a lens through which we view any decision, recommendation, or action. So that was the last question. First slide. Any questions on that?
Stephen?
Brian had a question, but then stood down because he was jumping ahead. So thank you for that. Eric.
Stephen, I just wanted to say I represent septuagenarian Caucasian males, old white guys.
Well, it's interesting.
Those old white guys are going to be really important in the future because they vote.
They do. They do.
You got to pay attention to them.
And I think that, Eric is hitting a very important point, that we're developing a plan that will at some point lead to another capital measure. And you all are, whether you like it or not, are a voice of the community. We want to hear from you, good, bad, or otherwise, in terms of what we are coming up with in the plan. If, we can come up with priorities in terms of, hey, this is what we think should happen. But as you look at it, look at it through the lens of, your own experience, but also people that people that you hang out with, people that you may represent. And, please tell us, you're here to tell us, yeah, that works, or no, that doesn't play. You need to think otherwise. And, Eric, I really appreciate you pointing that out. So, and we have a wide range of people on this group. So thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions or hand raising. So why don't you take us to our next segment?
Great. All right, the next segment is the first of our 3 areas of consideration, or buckets, and that involves educational program and need associated with that. So obviously the district has a number of educational programs, quite a large number, and of those programs there were, as you see on the right-hand side, a series that have been pulled out that are in the lens right now and focus and under serious consideration. And of this group, there were several that popped out where need has been identified, and we were able to begin to try and quantify that as best as we could with regard to its impact or relationship to facilities. And the first of the programmatic areas that were identified had to do with special education in the district. The goal for special education, as you see here, is to provide adequate and equitable special education facilities at all schools. And the way that really looks at, anyway, in terms of a facility impact, is somewhere around 2 classrooms and associated support areas. And the idea behind this is that students can be served in their home attendance area rather than having to go out across the district. The existing condition in the district is that 21 elementary schools, 2 middle and 3 high schools currently have adequate special education facilities as they have been assessed by district staff overseeing special education. The need is 13 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, and 3 high schools need additional and or improved special education space. So that could be new space, or it could be modernizing some of the existing space. So you can get a sense there of from a global standpoint, what the need begins to look like district-wide in this programmatic area. So the idea behind it with regard to special education is that they also are interested in looking at providing a new standalone special education school to serve 130 students for whom the district cannot currently accommodate educational need. And the existing condition right now is that students are currently transported across the district, sometimes having to deal with long transportation times on a day-to-day basis. And how that translates into a need is that there could be a standalone special education school made available to them, so that it might be more centralized in the district, reduce transportation times, and provide better support for the programs for these students. A third area, our next program, is early childhood education. Steve made reference to this, and how while it was discussed when the last long-range facility plan was made, it's certainly getting more and more kind of in the focus of things today. The goal for this particular programmatic area is to provide 1 pre-K classroom at every elementary school with Title I status in the district. That's the baseline goal. The existing condition relative to that goal is that there are currently 15 Title I elementary schools identified, and that Title I recognition sort of changes over time depending on the demographic. So this is for the 2020-2021 school year. 6 Title I schools currently have pre-K programs. So what that means is, from a need standpoint, there are 9 elementary schools that are Title I that would need to add pre-K programs. And all of those schools that have been identified within that need category are also projected to have available capacity, which means that it could be possible to modernize or use existing space within the facility to accommodate that pre-K program. Another program where need has been identified involves physical education. The goal is to provide adequate space to meet the newly phasing in state PE requirements at all the district facilities. And the state requirements really apply to elementary and the middle school levels. The existing condition is we do know that there are a number of PE spaces that may not be adequate to meet that state requirement in some of the schools within the district. And so this is something that is under assessment right now, and we're trying to understand exactly the depth of that need. What that need really relates to is that if a facility would need to add space to be able to meet the requirements, it could mean additional gymnasiums or other PE teaching stations would need to be added at potentially some elementary and middle school levels. And again, these are still to be determined. We're kind of going through a calculation to determine how many and to what extent. District support is another programmatic area where need has been identified. The goal here is to provide adequate administration and support space to accommodate the district's educational programs and goals. And the existing condition is after an assessment of the space, there's a need for additional support space in the district. And that need is really directly associated with either potentially replacing at some point or expanding the central administration facilities, and also potentially replacing one or more of the transportation facilities, one of which is the Allen Transportation Facility. That's a possibility, and we'll show you some of the data associated with this here in just a few minutes. Steve mentioned the equity lens, which is very important. This is receiving a lot of emphasis by the district. And so we created this chart to really give you a glimpse at previous work that has been done over the course of the last two bonds in the district, and how that work might relate to equity when it's viewed through that lens, and what you see and how it might affect future long-range facility plans and what might need to be done. So here you see the series of schools on the left that have been recently constructed, recently meaning after the year 2000, and the yellow dots represent each of those schools. And you see in this matrix really kind of two factors, one moving from right to left, which is the percentage of students of color increasing as you go to the right, and one moving from bottom to top as you move to the top. It's the percentage of students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. And so you can see the distribution and of the new facilities, and we can also do this for significantly remodeled or modernized facilities, and how that is really distributed from the standpoint of equity, or at least two data points related to equity. And then, of course, there is a geographic implication of that. So we thought it would be important to try and understand from an equity standpoint where work has been done and where you might do work in the future as you look at the district geographically. Here you're seeing the distribution of new and replacement schools after 2000. So you see 3 elementary schools and a middle school north of 26. And then 4 elementary schools, a high school, and 1 alternative school south of 26. And so it's a relatively even distribution graphically. And I think this is a useful map literally to begin to understand in the broad spectrum of need, how equity and the next moves that the district might make might address that lens. One of the other factors associated with educational program is a metric that is typically called educational adequacy. One of the things that is commonly used to compare facilities across the district is the number of square feet per student that is afforded by each facility. In looking at this chart, when you look at the horizontal dashed lines at the elementary level, so elementary would be the bars on the left of the screen, and you see middle school and high school. The horizontal dash bars represent Beaverton School District's target square footage per student as it has been defined in the educational specification. So what this really means then is the district has done a lot of work with various stakeholders over time to determine how large, say, their target elementary school might be for a given number of students and what the individual square footage per student would be. So here at the elementary, you see 122 square feet per student. The middle school, you see 148 square feet per student as a target, and at the high school level, 155 square feet. And when the blue bars are schools that are at least or more than 20 square feet below the target, which is really a significant number of square feet per student less. And as you start to push down to that level, it has some significant implication on how well the facility is able to support educational programs. And here's a quick sort of little diagram that illustrates what I mean by that last statement. If you consider a difference of only 5 square feet per student, and remember those blue bars were representing 20 square feet or more, 5 square feet, if you would look at a cluster of a given grade level, say, which are the blue boxes at an elementary level, say 4 second grade or third grade classrooms, that additional 5 square feet would equate to at least in one scenario, additional 360 square feet of teaching space, common teaching space outside the classroom, and on top of that, 120 square feet additional space that might exist somewhere else in the elementary school. So you can quickly see how fast that square footage would add up. If you were looking at 20 square feet per student, that additional 15 square feet per student would add an elementary level gymnasium to an elementary. So you can see the square footage really adds up and can have an implication on programs. So generally, when we are looking at what are some of the things that relate to a learning environment, particularly with regard to how teaching students is really heading in today's world, what you see consistently is that facilities are now designed to accommodate learning everywhere. That they are really set up to try and support multiple modes of educational delivery, recognizing that everybody learns in different ways. They offer improved opportunities for social learning beyond just sort of, reading, writing, and arithmetic type level work. They integrate technology throughout. They try and maximize connections to the community, not only during the day, but also after hours. They incorporate educational partnerships and joint use. Many districts are incorporating and embracing sustainability in their new buildings, and they're really designed to help try and inspire students and help them learn in that way as well. Some quick takeaways. The last slide for this section is we know that there are areas that facility improvement can be made to better support program goals that the district has identified. And you've seen some of the key areas in this section. So special ed is one, early childhood education support, and so forth. And we also recognize and know that every decision that's made, not only from the standpoint of educational programming, but everything we're doing here needs to be considered through the lens of equity. And then finally, that there are a number of schools at the elementary and high school levels and middle school, not so much, I guess, that are significantly below the square footage targets that have been identified in the district educational specification. So that's something to consider moving forward. Little time for questions.
So Leroy, we had a couple of questions while you were talking. Jason asked about relationship of adequacy to age of building, and there definitely is a relationship, and we'll get to that here in a moment.
Yeah.
But before we go to questions, I want to introduce Kevin Buck, who joined us. He is from the Raleigh Park area, and for some reason we were having crossed wires on my email. I'll figure that out. So Kevin, if you could give us just the brief introduction of who you are, and that way we can catch everybody else up.
Yeah, briefly, my name's Kevin Buck. I have a child, a middle schooler at ACMA this year, a 7th grader. It's her first year at ACMA. Before that, she was at Whitford for her 6th grade. She did all of her elementary at Raleigh Park, and I currently have a 1st grader at Raleigh Park. So we're doing it all again this time around. I'm also former vice president for enrollment, student services, and program operations from the Pacific Northwest College of Art. So I'm just semi-retired from there last year.
Great. Well, thank you, Kevin, and appreciate you being here tonight.
So Abhijit has his hand up, but first, Brian had a question here, which is educational adequacy chart based on actual attendance or maximum/expected capacity? And Aaron, you were here when we developed the ed spec for that space, but I will let you turn around and say, how was that ed spec created for space per student at all of the levels of school? You need to unmute yourself, Aaron.
So good question. That's not how I interpreted Brian's question. I think he was asking specifically about the educational adequacy chart many of them put together.
So Brian, why don't you ask your question, because I apparently have misunderstood.
I think I can go to the chart. The number, so if you look at McKinley at 82 gross square feet per student, I think he's asking, was that taken from the actual attendance, or are we looking at a maximum expected capacity?
I guess, yes. I mean, the question I would have is that chart showing that the school is way over capacity, or that it's physically smaller, or physically too small, or a combination of both?
Great question. What it's showing is this is taking the capacity of the school, okay, as stated, and it's taking the gross square footage of the school and basically dividing. So if that school were, because obviously enrollment changes over time, it fluctuates. We want to be able to say, okay, if that school got to its full capacity, what does that really look like in terms of the square footage per student, and how well is it going to support the programs? And so you can see McKinley is a very small school relative to its capacity.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Abhijit, you had your hand up.
Yes, I had a few questions, but now let me start with one. On special education, you showed 2 slides. The first one was talking about providing adequate and equitable special education. And the second one was a standalone special ed school. So my question was, if we were to prioritize special education in all elementaries as the need talks about on slide 34, how would that impact the need for the standalone school? How are those two related? And that's why, and the first part of that on slide 34, when I was thinking about it, how do you prioritize when elementaries or middle schools are very close to each other and one probably has a special ed and the other one does not? Do you need it at both, or can you not give the most optimum number based on how the schools are located?
Right.
So that's a lot to unpack. Each year, our special education department identifies based on their enrollment and where the students are located. They turn around and designate spaces where different programs are going to be, because it's not special ed in one category. It's several different categories, and so they will try to program those classrooms in areas so transportation's minimized and things like that. It doesn't always work that way, because sometimes an enrollment at a school is so large, it may take over a special ed space. Before I get too far down that path, I'll defer to Carl to further answer that. But let me answer the other question you had about the standalone school. When we talk about the need here at the bottom of this slide, it's talking about just the, call it general special ed student classrooms that are needed. In terms of the standalone, we send a very large number of students to other locations across the region for specific programming. So for example, is the School of the Deaf will transport students to that location. So the standalone is separate from the bottom of this screen, as instead of transporting students elsewhere out of the Beaverton School District, the standalone would be, we can contain and have all of our students in one school in the district. Carl?
Yes, just a little further context on that, Abhijit. It's a great question. We service anywhere between 90 to 120 students outside of our school district on an average annual basis, and it potentially could tick up and does at different times. Some of those students, we get approximately $9,000 from the state to educate our students. We get a double weighting for a special ed student. So that would be approximately, and these are approximate numbers, so say that that's 18,000. For us to do a placement outside of our district, it costs us anywhere, I would say, there's not an average by any stretch. We pay anywhere between $32,000 and $60,000 per student for placement outside of our district. And in doing so, if we were able to shift that as a resource within the district, we would be able to save not only resources of money, but as Steve was talking about, a resource of time for a family. We have some students who have to sit on a bus upwards of an hour, sometimes an hour and 15 minutes, just to get to school, and the same on return. We have several students that we have to run all the way to the length of 84. And as you can well imagine, in commute traffic, that's not an easy adventure in a school bus. So there's a cost to that, but it costs in different ways, not only the district, but our students as well. So if we could better serve them in our community, better off we are. Steve was also talking about specific programs within schools. And we have a whole array of acronym soup for all those various types of programs. And those are programs that we have specifically in schools to meet the specialized needs of students. They may be behavioral. There may be elements of autism that a student has that are better served in a specific program. Doesn't mean that they're isolated in those programs. It simply means that they get specialized services in the context of their school day. And they're also potentially mainstreamed into classrooms throughout the day too. Were there other layers to your question, Abhijit?
No, Carl, that was very good. Thank you for clarification. And Steve, can I squeeze in one more question?
Yes.
In terms of what I don't see here. So I know the pandemic this year is once in 100 years, but I also know that district planned to do the online learning even before the pandemic. And towards the online learning, especially with Title I's elementaries and schools where maybe district has had more challenges in reaching out to the students that may or may not have the same access. How are you planning for that? And this must have been a surprise for you now, but I don't see anything here that talks about CDL or the likewise.
So excellent question. One of the, you heard Leroy and Frank talk about buckets as we move forward through the plan. Other buckets that we have if you remember the seesaw graphic that we had earlier, where you had the dollars and then categories, which are the buckets. We didn't show all the buckets. So for example, we have an technology bucket where that's how, in the last bond, that's how all the students got their devices. That's what pays for it. And that is, how we would have in this bond, if there is a future bond, we would put that bucket out there for part of that money. Same thing for transportation in terms of buying new buses and, things like that. It's not part of the facilities per se, so that's the reason why we're not showing it here, but that is part of any future bond that goes forward. We can certainly come with to you at our next meeting to kind of show the scale of, all right, here's the facilities part, but here are other things that we would want to aspire to do if we were to move forward with any kind of bond. And in terms of distance learning and supporting that, the facility part is we have facility staff who, we have the CDL or the flex staff. They're in a portable. So we would want to be sure that they're in a proper building so that we can grow that program and attract staff to want to be in that program. If there's more that we need to do in terms of wireless infrastructure or things like that, that too would be part of that IT bucket that we would have in a bond. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions on this section? Okay, let's move to the next section, Leroy.
Okay.
There are a couple in the chat there.
Steve, we have 2 questions in the chat.
I'm sorry. Okay, so would pre-K early elementary programs have an impact on enrollment? No, they wouldn't, because we're looking to have locate those pre-K programs and collect those families now, collect them early in the process and help them succeed as they get into kindergarten and move through the system. So we're not looking to expand outside of that particular catchment area. In terms of the enrollment at the school, yes, it would have an impact because we are adding more students to that particular campus. It's about 20-ish students for each pre-K class. Can pre-K program double as a career program at a high school, or do the pre-K programs have to be located at elementary schools? Carl, that's outside my area of expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not to say that we can't have pre-K programs at high schools, but the biggest factor that we're looking at and why we've located them in elementary schools is to be able to have students become familiar with their setting and their peer groups that they will be interfacing in the future. Our pre-K programs are approximately 2.5 hours, so it's a half day. It's the old same time frame as the old kindergarten model. So we do an AM and a PM session in those schools. So they're best served in an elementary environment where they're becoming very familiar with our food services, the other services of the school, PE and music, and any other resources that they have. But that does not preclude us from utilizing high school students and coming over into those programs. It's a great avenue for us to pursue. And we are currently, I know Beaverton High School is looking at expanding their CPE model to potentially include Vos Elementary School. So students would have an experience there. But as we continue to expand these pre-K programs, that would provide even more opportunities for Beaverton High School students. And I believe Aloha High School has also had a program at different times. So certainly an opportunity to expand.
Okay, sorry about that. Anybody else have a question on this section? Okay, Leroy, next section, please.
Okay. The second bucket we're looking at is facility condition, and there are a lot of different considerations and metrics in this one, and you're going to get overwhelmed with a lot of information here. There are just as a high-level overview, over 5.7 million square feet of space in the district, and that is distributed amongst 34 elementaries, 9 middle schools, 6 high schools, 5 options programs, 8 support facilities, and 3 properties that are currently undeveloped district owned. And the variety of schools across the district is very broad. You have everything from brand new schools built in the last bond to schools that are a number of schools that are over 75 years old and some even pushing over 100 years old. So we'll be talking kind of a high level view about all of those here in the next few slides. So we find it useful just to sort of understand at, again, a very high level what the range of ages are for facilities across the district. Many districts set their own sort of bar, if you will, with regard to what they might consider the lifespan of a school in their district. And that bar changes depending on the district and community's opinion associated with that. Some districts say 50-ish years, others say 75 years. And so what this is really showing you is the great distribution of ages. And what you see is that there are several buildings located in your district that are over 75 years old. So you see McKay, Barnes, Raleigh Hills at the elementary level, Beaverton High School, which is at least in portions of it 105 years old, and Terra Nova in the options program at 82 years old. So suffice to say, in many districts that we have worked with, these particular schools and possibly even some of the others that are right at the break point of 75 would be those schools that would be considering ending their useful life and need to be looked at very carefully from a broad systems standpoint. That's not a rule, it's sort of a general rule of thumb, so to speak. One of the ways that facilities are assessed at a slightly more finer grain is called a facility condition assessment, or FCA. An FCA was completed at Beaverton School District in 2020, just this year. And one of the things that comes out of this facility condition assessment is something known as a facility condition index, an FCI. And what that is it generates a score that allows you to see in a glance the relative condition of facilities across the district. So as you start to think about where your priorities may lie based on your facilities condition, which ones you might need to act on sooner rather than later. And an FCI score represents the ratio of the total deferred maintenance cost as it's represented relative to the current replacement cost of the building as is. So what percentage of replacing the building as is would you have to spend in order to deal with all of the deferred maintenance? And there are rating systems out there, FCI rating systems. They do vary a little bit, but generally speaking, most of them are similar to the chart that you see on this slide, where an FCI rating of 0 to 5%, so that would be 0 to 5% of replacement value, would be considered in good condition. 5 to 10 would be fair, 10 to 30 would be poor, and if it's greater than 30%, then many districts will start to consider looking at facility replacement. And I know that some of you are probably thinking, wow, really, you'd replace a facility if it's just more than 30%. The one thing to consider is that deferred maintenance, fixing deferred maintenance items does not necessarily, well, it doesn't mean that you're actually when you do a replacement, creating a new facility by fixing that deferred maintenance. Deferred maintenance does not include things like addressing educational adequacy. It does not mean that you are improving the energy performance of a building. It does not mean that you are doing full-on systems replacements either. You're just dealing with deferred maintenance. So that's why the percentage is so low here as just a metric. When we look at the FCI scores coming out of the report that was completed this year, here you see the chart again with elementary schools on the left-hand side, middle schools here in the middle, high schools, options, and support facilities. The blue bars are those schools that exceed the 30% trigger point and are up in the range of critical and are candidates for consideration relative to potential replacement. It's not saying that you must replace them. They're just schools that you might want to consider looking at as candidates for that. And so just as a quick glance, what you see here is you see Cedar Mill is right up there, and Raleigh Park is right up there. And for some reason, Raleigh Hills has dropped off on this. I don't know why, but its chart is up here right at the top as well. In fact, I think it's the highest on the chart. Beaverton High School exceeds that, and Whitford exceeds it, as does Terra Nova, ISB, and both transportation facilities here. Another consideration, which is partially incorporated or incorporated into FCI, is really the seismic condition. It's a specific data point to really be looking at. Seismic Evaluation report was completed in 2019 by third-party structural engineers. Since that report has been made, 3 schools have had upgrades made to them sort of in response to that report and fixing seismic situations that were not good. When we look at seismic condition, there are 6 tiers or levels of condition that ratings fall into. The district's goal within these 6 tiers is the damage control range, which you see here with the arrow. And so the highest level, you can say the most resilient, strongest building, I guess that's a simple way to say it, is the immediate occupancy level, which means that during a major seismic event, the likelihood of you being able to immediately occupy or move back into that building or use it as a refuge space is really associated with that level. Damage control here means that you are going to likely be able to reoccupy the building, although there may be some seismic repair that needs to be made. Life safety is essentially getting people out of the building safely so that during a major seismic event, you're strengthening it such that people have the time to get out. However, there could still be severe damage, and depending on the extent of that damage and its location, the building could either be repaired or it may not be able to be repaired. There's a limited safety range that sort of falls between these 2 points right here, which is the one below that is collapse prevention. So this is really just trying to get it so the building doesn't fall down, try to get people out safely, although the likelihood is that you're going to have to replace the building after the event. And then finally, less than collapse prevention, high likelihood that the building will collapse. And if it doesn't collapse, you pretty much cannot go back in the building and you would certainly have to replace it. And this chart is really a single representation of or summary of the report findings, the structural report findings. So here you see in the pink bar the district's goal of damage control. So the higher the bars in this chart, the better condition the building is from a seismic standpoint. And so, of course, no surprise, your newer schools, which you see here, Timberland here, and Mountainside here, are well within that range. And in fact, they are in the immediate occupancy range because they were designed to that level. At the other end of the spectrum, you see a number of schools that are actually falling below the collapse prevention level. So there are 4 elementaries: Raleigh Hills, Forest Grove, McKay, and Raleigh Park. And then you see 4 of the current middle schools: Mountain View, Cedar Park, Highland Park, and Whitford. Beaverton High School falls below, as does ISB. From an energy use standpoint, looking again at another metric related to facility condition, this chart is really trying to understand at a district-wide level, if you spend, say, $1 on a given facility related to modernization, and ideally particularly related to any of the systems associated with energy, what is going to give you the highest return on that investment, on that dollar? And so the higher the bars are here, that represents the most return on your investment with regard to spending money and getting the highest energy improvement back. So way to think about it is these blue bars are some of your most poorly performing from an energy standpoint. And if you did modernizations or replacement at these facilities, you're going to get the highest return from an energy improvement. So again, Raleigh Hills, K8 is showing up on this, McKay, McKinley, Cedar Hill, Shoals Heights, Montclair, Cooper Mountain. And then at the middle school level, Mountain View, 5 Oaks, Beaverton High School again, Terra Nova, and a whole series of your support facilities. And no surprise here, if you look at the age of these facilities, generally speaking, you see that they are from, most of them are from the middle of the last century, 1950s, 60s, 1929. So there again, you start to see just a correlation on the age of the building relative to its energy performance. From a deferred maintenance standpoint, if you're wondering how these numbers are arrived at, there is a highly detailed facility condition report behind all of the FCI numbers and the deferred maintenance numbers. This is just one summary page that was produced for the 2020 report. But at the high level again, it's good to understand, I think, that the total deferred maintenance need district-wide, and again, think of deferred maintenance as fixing stuff that needs to be fixed, but it doesn't solve all of your problems in terms of energy, educational adequacy. It doesn't fix everything. It fixes deferred maintenance. Is $610 million. So this includes structural, mechanical, electrical deferred maintenance, exterior enclosure and finishes, commercial equipment, fire, life safety, and site work. It's useful too to really try and understand when you're building a plan where you have had recent capital expenditures, particularly more significant capital expenditures, because one of the things you don't want to do is look at, say, replacing a facility that you may have spent a relatively large amount of money on in the last 2 bond cycles or so. So what you're looking at here is in the blue, these are facilities that are brand new, essentially, so lots of expenditure, obviously. And then across the elementary schools, you see just a few schools where some you might consider significant expenditure has been made. So at Beaver Acres, Cedar Mill, Ridgewood, a few of the others. But generally speaking, they've been somewhat modest expenditures from the 2014 bond project list. A few in the middle school level, 5 Oaks, Aloha, got a good investment, as did Sunset Community School, and then the maintenance center as well. So the takeaways on this, again, very, very high level, are 5 facilities are more than 75 years old. So they've kind of cleared the age hurdle of, hey, is there something that we might want to consider doing with these buildings? And if so, what? 13 of the facilities are considered to be relative to their FCI score in unsatisfactory condition and are candidates for potential replacement at some point in the not too distant future. And there are overlaps between these two kind of categories. 2/3 of facilities are below the goal of seismic life safety that the district has established. And that includes 10 facilities that are actually below the collapse prevention level, which really needs to be addressed. 16 facilities have an energy use index rating of 5, which means that those with an energy use index of 5 are the ones where you have the greatest opportunity for improvement. Those were the blue bars that you saw. And the total facility condition need relative to deferred maintenance is $610 million. And now we have an opportunity, a few minutes for questions, if there are any.
So I haven't seen anything in the chat or see any hands raised. I see Abhijit has just raised his hand. So Abhijit, take it away.
Hey, Leroy, thanks again. Few questions. So on the takeaway slide, if I, can you clarify again, if I look at the bullets?
Which slide?
The takeaway slide, your summary slide.
Oh, yes.
So are all the top bullets, are they included in the 610 million, or is it on top of 610 in need-wise?
Do you want to take that, Aaron, or?
Yes, I'll need you to repeat the question. I didn't hear it quite clearly.
So there are line items in each of those bullets for the takeaways, and each of those have a cost associated with them, as shown on the previous slides. I was wondering if those costs are part of that 610 million, or is it outside of that?
These costs.
Oh, let's see. Yeah, it includes the deficiencies currently within the facility. It would not. Oh, on the deferred maintenance slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yes, this is what makes up the 610 million. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the other question I had was, so how do you balance between events that happen every day and can save money, like the energy efficiency, versus events that are, of course, very catastrophic, but are not supposed to happen every day? And especially when I look at the building age, there are some clear outliers that we need to work on. But you could be swayed by earthquake readiness. And maybe if you look at all the families within Beaverton School District, how many actual houses have that what I'm saying is not all parents actually have houses that are in that, right? So how do you balance that? That was one question. And the second one was, in any of these, I did not see any mention of portables, which accounts for maybe 10% student population. And so what is the city's way of regulating that, or what is the standard for that? And what's the district's plan for long range for that?
Well, I guess I can take the first question, and then with regard to portables and the district's plan for that, it may be good to have one of the district representatives field that one. Typically, first of all, your questions are great and spot on in terms of one of the planning strategies that really need to be implemented. The first thing is what we always see district-wide, even in just this category alone, facility condition, is there's always more cumulative need than districts could ever hope to get support for from a community to deal with everything. And so what that means is that you have to come up with a way to develop prioritization, essentially. And districts do that differently. And one of the ways that that is commonly done is they start to look at their deferred maintenance and facility need in particular categories. And actually, those categories are almost exactly some of the categories that you mentioned. So one of them would be catastrophic need. That means another way to state that is maintaining operations. So if a boiler would fail, let's say, and it was an old boiler and you hadn't prepared to replace that boiler and it failed in the middle of winter, that facility is probably not going to be able to operate if it's during a cold period. And so one of the goals is to really look at all of the deferred maintenance and begin to look at the categories that the specific needs fall into. Is it health and life safety? That's another category that's very common. Some of the need is associated with that. Another need is protecting capital investment. So if you have, for example, a roof that is either leaking or it's going to leak within the next 10 years, it's a good idea to look and fix that just to protect the investment that the community's already made. Otherwise, you're going to have a much bigger problem. So what happens is you get a series of categories within the overall cost. The district can then take a look at those and begin to determine how much capital would be needed to address those needs in the priority sequence that they have chosen, essentially. And how deep you go into that facility need is entirely dependent really on two things. What need exists outside of facility condition? So that could be enrollment in capacity is one, or it could be educational programs. And the other thing it's dependent on is really, to be crass about it in a way, is how big of a bond can you pass? How much capital will the community support? So that's kind of the way it plays out. Did that answer your question? Did that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Would one of the district?
I'll take on the portable question. The goal of the district is to remove portables from sites. We want our students to be in the permanent buildings for a variety of reasons. In terms of the facility conditions assessment, Aaron, I don't believe the portables were assessed at in that report, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of what needs to happen with them or what improvements are needed, we didn't do that assessment. In terms of the portables that we do have, looking at each one as we move across all the buildings at the district, we are looking to remove them as quickly as we can. Now, as you will see in this next segment, we're going to talk about enrollment projections and what capacities that we have. And there are schools that rely on portables for that capacity. And under the last, the 2014 bond, we were able to do improvements to schools wherein we were able to remove portables. So Five Oaks is an example of that. ACMA is another. So as we look at all the different factors in terms of developing a list of priorities for investment, recognizing that enrollment and what portables we have could lead to, this group advising us that, hey, we need to invest at school X in order to get rid of those portables. And Abhijit, as you well know, we have other tools to create, capacity, to address capacity issues. Everybody's favorite subject of boundary adjustments is, another way of doing that. So it's not always just building new. We have capacity to accommodate every student that we have in the district in a permanent building. We just don't have, based on our current boundaries, we don't have capacity in certain attendance boundaries necessarily. So do we shift boundaries? Do we do investments? Or do we do a combination of all? And that's part of what we're going to discover going through this planning process.
And thank you, Steve. And yes, the boundary subject is separate. What I was really getting at was the district, does it maintain data on all these parameters that Leroy just showed in terms of, hey, what is the age of portables? How often are they tested? Because if I'm a parent sending my kids and they're going to portables, I would want to know, right? What's their seismic readiness and do they cost more as they age? Because all of those things are going to matter when I'm going to vote on if the bond comes up. Right?
Yes, we have data on all the portables in terms of their seismic safety and other things. I'm going to let Aaron address that.
Yes, good question. We did have that assessed, just we did not include it in this report today. So I can dig up that information and get it. And then it was not, the portables were not included in the facilities conditions assessment, but we do assess them ourselves internally. So our maintenance department goes around and inspects them annually, and they are kept up to date and they are very well maintained and everything. It's just, it wasn't part of the facilities condition assessment.
Thank you.
Okay, so before moving on to this segment, does anybody else have any questions about the facility conditions subject we were just talking about? Okay, seeing none, Leroy, please take us to our last section here.
All right, Frank.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, Frank Angelo. Talk about the supply and demand side of this, the enrollment and the capacity at existing schools. But first, give you a quick overview of the district. It's the third largest school district in the state of Oregon with about 41,000 students behind Portland and Salem-Keizer. You can see the distribution between the various grade levels, and it does have an option, an alternative program that are included in those numbers as well. Next slide. In terms of the planning parameters for the discussing and considering enrollment and capacity, existing capacity of existing buildings really reflects the number of available seats that are in a school. And that's based on the existing number of classrooms, the target class size, and the utilization rate. And the district has ed specifications for target class size of 25 students per class in elementary, 25 in middle, and 30 in high school. And the utilization rates, as you can see, 100% in elementary, 80 in middle, and 83 in high school for utilization rate. Target capacities have been established for the various grade levels. These were actually adopted in the 2010 long-range facility plan for elementary schools. The target capacity is 750 students, 1,100 students at the middle school level, and 2,200 students at the high school level. And those were applied to the recent bond program projects where new schools were provided. The projected enrollment, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Portland State University provides the school district with a student enrollment on a forecast on an annual basis. And what we are using as a 10-year forecast right now, 2030, 31, is the planning horizon for the long-range facility plans. And that will, the information you'll see coming up in terms of future enrollment is based on that 2030, 31 school year. Next slide, please. So taking the existing capacities of all the school facilities that the district has, going from left to right, if the district has a school facility elementary school target capacity of 750 students, you can see there are very few existing schools that currently reach that level. The five on the left and highlighted in red are more than 60% under the target capacity. Montclair, McKinley, West TV, Mountain View, and Raleigh, West TV, Raleigh Park, and Ridgewood. The bars also show, getting to the question on portables, existing permanent capacity as well as adding in portable capacity. So for instance, Chehalem shows a total capacity of 475 permanent capacity, and it has some additional capacity that pushes it over the 500 threshold, utilizing existing portables. As Steve said, it's the policy of the district to ultimately get rid of and remove the portables at the schools, but this chart reflects that. The existence and the presence of those portables. The middle school level, the target is 1,100 students per school. Timberland, the most recently constructed one, was constructed to that 1,100 student capacity level. The other 8 middle schools do not reach that target level. And at the high school level, 2,200, again, Sunset and Mountainside are approaching that. Westview, with the addition of portables, and you'll note, and when we get to the high school portion of this presentation, you'll note the demand that is there for more than 2,200 students. So this chart is giving you a kind of a perception of where the existing schools are in terms of in relation to the district's target capacities at the 3 grade levels. Next slide, please. At the elementary school level, we're showing the existing enrollment, and the projected enrollment declines by 6%. As I mentioned in the opening segment, that the PSU forecasts are for a decline in enrollment in the next 10 years. At the elementary school level, the 6% enrollment is the largest of the levels in terms of decline. There are, as you can see on the map, are a couple areas, however, where the enrollment is forecasted to increase. Up in the north at Sato, and down in the southwest corner of the district in the Hazeldale area, and that's due to some new areas that are in the urban growth boundary that are just recently brought into the urban growth boundary that will come online in the Cooper Mountain area during the 10-year planning horizon. Next slide, please. Comparing the capacity and enrollment, again, with 17,043 projected enrollment, the capacity, the overall capacity at the elementary school level is 19,550 in the permanent capacity. As Steve said, there's plenty of capacity in the permanent structures. However, the distribution of that capacity is where the district has run into some issues. And as you can see on the map here, up in the north of Sunset Highway, Sato and Bonnie Slope, you can see where there are some pretty significant increases in enrollment at those specific elementary schools, and even a couple other elementary schools north of Sunset as well. The remainder of the district, as you can see, the blue and the light at the darker blue is where the reductions in enrollment will be occurring. Next slide, please. This is basically a different representation of what you just saw. Bonnie Slope, Sato are over capacity in that 10-year period over their existing capacity. And let's see, that's it. Next slide, please. And there are some that are pretty significantly 30% below in the 2030-31 school year. William Walker, for example, the recently constructed new school is forecast to be 274 students under capacity in the 2030-31 school year. So there's some distribution issues in terms of overcapacity and undercapacity in the district. Next slide, please. At the middle school level, the PSU is forecasting approximately a 3% enrollment reduction. The map shows the timberland area that is currently in the boundary establishment adjustment process. I don't know that that is the final representation, final boundary. I think it was one of the more recent boundary proposals, but we wanted to show something in that area, so that we got the most recent as well. As you can see from the map, the decline in enrollment is pretty widespread at the middle school level. Whitford is the only area where there's forecast to be an increase in middle school enrollment. Next slide, please. Comparing the forecast, however, with the existing capacity at each middle school, you can see again that up in the north portion, the northwest corner of the district, the Stoller, when you add in the forecast of the middle school enrollment to the capacity at Stoller, it's over capacity by 537 students. There are a couple other, the south and the central portions of the district where there is small incremental increases, but the other major areas like the Timberland area, the Five Oaks area are showing pretty substantial decreases in enrollment and being under capacity. At the high school level, 10,100 students are forecasted at the high school level in 2030-31. Again, an almost a 6% reduction in enrollment between now and 10 years. There are 3 high schools that are projected to have an enrollment decline of more than 15%. And those aren't high schools. William Walker's, I'm sorry, that's a misprint. I'm sorry. So go to the next slide, please. The capacity at the high school level and enrollment. Again, there is sufficient capacity, but once again, up in the northwest corner of the district, Westview continues to be almost 600 students over capacity in the 2030-31 area, while 3 high schools, Beaverton, Southridge, and Sunset, are forecasted to be 300 students under capacity. So again, the distribution issue up in the Northwest. And it's not surprising, that's where much of the most growth has occurred in the district recently, and where much of the vacant land within the district boundaries is present, and you can expect a continuation of growth in the particular area. Next slide, please. This shows the projected middle and high school over enrollment. Stoller at the middle school level, again, being 537 over the capacity. Westview, 588 over capacity. And the ISB program is showing 314, enrollment 314 over capacity. Next slide, please. And then adding in the under capacity, Timberland, Beaverton High School, Southridge High School, and the community high school are forecasted to be more than 30% below their permanent capacities. Next slide, please. This is the south. This is the Cooper Mountain area that I was referring to earlier. This is an area in southern, southwestern Beaverton that is coming into the urban growth boundary, and there is planning going on in that area right now. The area within the dashed red line is the planning area. The South Cooper Mountain area to the south of that came into the urban growth boundary a few years ago. Planning was done, and as you know by driving through that area now, it's a substantial amount of growth has occurred in that area, including Mountainside High School, which is shaded in the blue. The planning effort that's going on now with the city of Beaverton is within that dashed line. That's the area that will come online during the 10-year planning period of the long-range facility plan, and it's forecasted to generate anywhere from 539 to 719 new elementary students, 192 middle school students, and 173 new high school students. So while it's not ready to develop today, it is expected to come online during the planning period of the long-range facility plan. So we need to account for it. The solid red line in the North Cooper Mountain area and the creeks that are shown on this map are in the Hillsborough School District. Next slide, please. And then the takeaways. Again, 5 elementary schools are more than 60% below the target capacity of 750 students per elementary school. And projected enrollment over the next 10 years is expected to decline. However, there are, as I noted, some individual schools that are projected to have pretty significant enrollment growth or declines. And district-wide, I think as Steve mentioned just a few minutes ago, district-wide there is existing a capacity to accommodate the projected enrollment in permanent capacity that exists. However, the distribution of that triggers several individual schools to be projected to be significantly over or under enrolled. So that was a quick review of the capacity and enrollment, and open for questions.
Thank you, Frank. There were, Angel, you asked 3 different questions, it looks like, in the chat. So why don't you go ahead and ask your questions here so we can answer them in turn.
Sure. So the most recent one that I'd asked was if the estimates for over and under enrollment statistics include any projections for how the racial demographics and proportions will adjust as the population shifts, because that seems like it would be important information to keep in mind as you're trying to figure out what needs to service as time goes on.
Yeah. Robert, do you want to take that one on?
Yeah, the Portland State's forecast is a population-based forecast. I don't think that they necessarily include.
Hey, Robert, your audio is not working very well here. So,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, it's my microphone's snaked around my neck. Portland State University does this projection or does this forecast, and it is population-based. So I'm not sure that there are racial and ethnic breakouts within the forecast itself, but they are taking sort of a holistic view of the population within the area. I would need to look at the forecast again to see if there's any specific breakdown for that question.
Okay, Angel, why don't you go ahead and bring us your other questions here. I think your second question is a really loaded question, in terms of the undercapacity and other schools not meeting standards in terms of like educational adequacy. Once this meeting's over, I would invite you all to take a look at the graphs that are in the presentation. I think you'll see that many of the schools are, frequently identified as being on the negative end of the spectrum. And I think you will see we as staff are kind of going, which gets to your question here is, in terms of, how we develop this plan, if we have capacity issues, whether they're over capacity or under capacity, coupled with the age or the square foot per student or things like that, again, there's the range of opportunity here to address that issue. It could be, do we reinvest in the building? So for example, Vos Elementary, lots of capacity concerns there. It was a very old building and the classrooms were small. So the prior bond prioritized replacing that school in order to accommodate all those issues. As we look at all the other schools, you'll be tasked with the same question as you'll be asking yourself is, does it make sense to invest in a new school here? Does it make sense to invest in more classrooms? Does it make sense to, build capacity elsewhere? And, we'll guide you through those, through that calculus as we have for you to, say yay or nay to that. And as I said earlier about the portables, it's just like, the capacity with the buildings is, do we need to do a boundary adjustment? That was one of the primary objectives for the middle school boundary adjustment, was to remove students from Stoller because the capacity, there was too many students in the school for the capacity of the school. So there's several different tools that we could use, and that as you go through this process, we're going to have to make some choices, which will then result in different priorities. So Angel, did I answer your questions? Did we answer your questions?
I would say my questions have been answered.
Okay, thank you. All right. I don't see any other questions in chat, but I do see Abhijit's hand raised. So Abhijit.
Hey, Steve, I'm always fascinated with this undeveloped properties plan. So the message I'm getting is we are going down in enrollment. And I think from what Leroy presented, maybe there is a need for one additional school for special needs. So how does the district balance, and I think there are 3 undeveloped properties. So how do you balance paying property taxes for those when you may or may not need it? And does it, as part of your long range plan, do you consider that as a source of income to offset some of the costs? Yeah. Now that for next 10 years, you're not going to need it, maybe.
Right. So as the district staff will attest, I have lots of schemes for properties across the district. However, I will also observe that nobody is making more land anywhere. And so getting rid of land, declaring it surplus and selling it would be a very, very serious consideration to move forward, because once it's gone, it's gone. And so while we do have projections for declining enrollment, we don't have projections for, it falling off the edge of a table. And, I grew up in an area where the enrollment did drop off the edge of a table. And so the district that I grew up in sold all kinds of property. But income revenue streams are always under consideration, whether they be grants, whether they be leases. We do have long-term ground leases with different users that help, add to our general fund. So everything's on the table, but they increase in seriousness when you get to declaring something surplus. declaring portables surplus, man, I can't give them away fast enough. And, it's an expensive proposition because moving a portable is expensive. And, different school districts or different users, want to consider, well, do I really want this? So some revenue streams are not as good as others. So Brian, you had your hand up next.
I was just going to ask, didn't Portland Public Schools surplus a bunch of properties in the 80s and 90s when they were having an enrollment decline and then found themselves in a real pinch in the last 5 or 10 years?
Seeing I wasn't here in the 80s or 90s, I can't address that. I'm going to look at Frank because I think he's been here that long.
Yeah, in fact, longer, but yeah, I think that, Brian, I think that is the case. And in fact, I think in the 70s, Beaverton actually had some surplus facilities like Cedar Hills Elementary School. That's now the Tualatin Hill and Garden Home that are now the Tualatin Hills Park and Recreation District facilities. So I think in the 70s, they had some surplus properties, but I mean, I think Steve is spot on in terms of they're not making more land, especially within the district. I mean, there may be expansions to the urban growth boundary, but the district is pretty well defined, the district boundaries, and within that boundary, it would be difficult to dispose of property that you owned, a vacant property that could be used in the future. Now, it does raise the question about more efficient use of existing sites, and that's part of the discussion that the long-range facility plan will delve into. Are there some sites that are large and may be able to accommodate an additional school or something, or things of that nature? But are there's sites that can be used more efficiently to accommodate capacity? No.
And I would just make one observation. While we have a lot of good solid projection data, we look over at the east side of the district. I'll just say east of 217, and that's a declining area. We've got our older schools, and maybe we could declare one of those sites surplus, do some boundary adjustments and accommodate the growth. But you will all note that there is an approximately 70-acre vacant site over there on the east side. And it's really well landscaped, and Frank goes out there and digs divots all the time. But that site is owned by the city of Portland and leases it out for the Redtail Golf Course. Is the Redtail Golf Course always going to be there? Is the Portland Country Club always going to be there? So, we may say, yeah, we can get rid of a site east of 217, but if those develop, maybe not. So those are the kinds of things that we, got to keep in mind.
Well, I think one of the other phenomenons that happened in the 80s was when light rail came in, the local jurisdictions looked at station areas and they increased the densities in those areas enormously. And that in turn created some demand for students. That created students in areas that people really and historically didn't think would happen, like the Aloha area. And some plans do change. And that's, I think, one example of that.
Eric, you had your hand up next.
Thank you, Stephen. What would be the best word to describe the deferred maintenance situation in Beaverton schools? Is it serious? Is it dire? Is it manageable?
Josh, do you want to handle that?
Sure. I mean, you can tell from the number, Eric, 610 million, it's pretty significant. I mean, that there's just a laundry list of items that we need to go through, prioritize, and that's why a capital improvement bond is so important for us to be able to get our facilities to the right condition so that we can support our students.
Well, I'm just wondering, why aren't we paying more attention to deferred maintenance rather than talking about building new buildings when we have these buildings that are already there that need help?
And that's what we'll talk about in the next meeting, Eric, is what is our plan? Well, and it's an important topic, but we have to prioritize everything that we just talked about, the need, growth. You know, now we're looking at technology as well, especially now in an environment where we're dealing with COVID, right? And looking at how you support that transportation. So it's a balance of all these priorities, and we're going to talk to that and then cover why we're putting so much of our plan into deferred maintenance.
So thank you, Eric. The you know, I note that we are past our 8:30 time here, and I want to be respectful of all of your time. Leroy, I don't know if we had other slides to guide us here this evening. I know we had a next steps type of thing, but before we go on to that, I wanted to ask if anybody else has any questions about our capacity and enrollment section of the presentation. Okay, seeing none. Leroy, why don't you bring us on?
There are really just a couple more slides, and one of them was really related to a general discussion, which if there were any general or closing questions. And then the only other thing we would just touch on are what our next steps are. So with that in mind, if anyone had any sort of general questions about anything that you have seen, or are there anything about what you have seen that struck you as a surprise? Are there anything that you have seen that or that you haven't seen that you think is a need that has not been identified by the group so far? That would be something to think about. And I should say, this is probably a good time to suggest that after we leave this meeting, if you go away and are eating your ice cream or whatever, and you go, oh, I do have a question actually, as a follow-up, I'm going to go ahead and say those questions should be filtered through Steve. And then those questions would then be populated amongst the rest of the district leadership group and the planning team. And we could discuss those, and then we could bring the question back and the response to it at the opening of our next meeting as well.
So Jason, you just asked a question on chat. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question for us?
So we've seen a lot of good data tonight, and a lot of it's piqued my interest, and I'm looking forward to kind of diving in and kind of just absorbing it. My question is, as I talk to other parents in the neighborhood, community members, I mean, is any of this locked down, or is this, I mean, assuming since this is being posted on the district website that this is open public knowledge?
Yes, all of it is public, and I would strongly encourage all of you to shop it around. Put it, if you have holiday greeting cards that you're going to be sending out, attach it, stick it in there, send it out to people. Don't send it to your mom and dad who might be living in Phoenix, but if you have friends that are local, please do. We want to use you not only for your insight, your opinions, and your knowledge, but also the context that you have out in the community. Unfortunately, we're not standing on the sidelines watching football or soccer or anything, but we do want you to talk with people. We want you to share this. It's kind of like, hey, did you know? Beaverton High School is 105 years old. I mean, those kinds of things. It's really important that our community understand this. like Kimmy, I find this stuff terribly interesting. But Kimmy and I are oddballs. We admit it. You know, I love land use planning and this kind of analysis, but most people really kind of like, huh? You know, particularly if they don't have children in the school system anymore, or like Angel, he hasn't had them yet. You know, it's important that we connect with this community to build that knowledge and that support for what's going on. So please share. Absolutely.
Any other questions before we get ready to close here? Okay. All right. Well, I know that this has been a little bit like drinking out of a fire hose because it's a lot of information to try and absorb. With regard to that, I wanted to suggest that to add a little bit of more pain to it, before we meet next time, and this is part of next steps, which is December 15th. And remember, at that meeting, we will be presenting some of the district's thinking regarding a plan approach, what you do with all this information, and come up with some prioritized thinking and apply some capital numbers to it and all of that. That before we meet, if you can stand it, maybe take 30 minutes or so and kind of quickly review this PowerPoint presentation. Just very quick, high-level, brief click through it, just so you're reminded of it, because all of this need information that you've seen tonight is really a good reference point for you to begin to assess the district's plan approach thinking. In other words, is what is being put out there making sense to you based on what you have seen relative to need and as a community member? And we'll also be talking to you about whether or not it makes sense to you from the standpoint of the level of proposed capital expenditure. And we'll talk more about that later on the 15th when we open. So that's really that will be our next steps. I do want to respect your time. And again, I want to thank you very much for participating tonight. We do know that you have other lives out there that are pulling on you in every other direction. But I would say that the input that you are going to be giving with regard to this plan will be listened to by the district. And any ideas that you come up with that feel like they should be incorporated into the plan will be discussed very seriously and could very well have a strong impact on the plan. So it's a very important role you're playing.
So thank you, Leroy. One last comment and we'll let you go. And then I would ask the staff and the team to hang on for just a minute as we dismiss you. Please feel free to send me any of your thoughts, questions, comments, you know, attaboys, are you kidding me? You know, everything. I am here to help you, and please, by all means, send me an email and we can be sure we do that. Our goal is to get you the materials at least a week before the meeting so you have time to review and think and cogitate. If we can do it earlier, we will. So as you receive that and as questions come up or you know, anything that you want or you're not seeing, please let me know and we will be as responsive to you as possible. So if there are no other questions or comments, seeing none, if our team and staff could stick around for a moment, please enjoy the rest of your evening.